Foggia Airfield, Italy, February found scene 944. Picture this. Captain Alejandro Torriani, a cocky 24-year-old Italian ace with kills to his name, is laughing so hard at reconnaissance photos that he's almost spilling his morning espresso. "Marco, come look at this joke," he calls to his wingman, waving the photos in the air. The Americans have finally lost their minds. They call this thing the Corsair. The photo shows what looks like a flying disaster, wings bent like a broken seagull, a nose so massive it seems like someone strapped an engine to a bathtub and called it a fighter plane. Madonna mia. Lieutenant Santini chuckles, shaking his head. How can something this ugly even fly? Our beautiful Falore will dance circles around this flying brick. But here's what these confident Italian pilots didn't know. In just a few hours, their laughter would turn to absolute terror. That ugly flying bathtub they were mocking, it was about to become their worst nightmare and change aerial warfare forever. What happened next would shatter everything these experienced pilots thought. They knew about air combat, the desperate need for speed. Let me take you back. Lieutenant T-40. The U.S. Navy had just given chance, fought an impossible mission. Build us a fighter that's faster than anything flying, can destroy enemy bombers with devastating firepower, and can land on aircraft carriers. Most engineers would have laughed, but Rex Beisel, Vought's chief designer, saw an opportunity where others saw impossibility. The problem? To get the speed they wanted, he needed the most powerful engine available, the massive 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp. But this beast of an engine required a propeller over 3 feet in diameter. Imagine trying to land that on an aircraft carrier without the propeller kissing the deck. Beisel's solution was pure genius. Those ugly inverted gull wings that the Italian pilots were laughing at. They weren't a design flaw. They were revolutionary engineering. By bending the wings down and then back up, he could mount the landing gear at the lowest point, giving that massive propeller the clearance it needed. The result? An aircraft that looked like nothing anyone had ever seen before. Birth of a monster. When the first F4U Corsair rolled off the production line in 942, it immediately started breaking records like they were made of paper. First American fighter to exceed 400 mph. Check, 47 mph to be exact. Most powerful fighter engine in the world. Double check. Most devastating armament ever mounted on a fighter. Triple check. But speed was just the beginning of this monster's capabilities. The Corsair's armament was absolutely devastating. 6 Browning 50 caliber machine guns mounted in the wings. When all 6 fired together, they unleashed 4,500 rounds per minute of pure destruction. Each bullet weighed nearly 2 ounces and traveled at over 2,800 feet per second. This wasn't just firepower. This was aircraft shredding annihilation. And here's the kicker. The Corsair was built like a tank. While other fighters would crumble under battle damage, the F4U could absorb punishment that would destroy any other aircraft and keep flying. But there was one problem. The troubled child. Every revolutionary weapon has teething problems, and the Corsair had plenty. The U.S. Navy initially rejected the Corsair for carrier operations. Why? It was a handful to fly, torque effects that could catch pilots off guard, visibility problems during landing, and a terrifying tendency to stall without warning. Several test pilots died learning the Corsair's secrets. So where did it go? The Marines, land-based operations where the Corsair's challenging characteristics were more manageable. This decision would prove to be destiny. Marine pilots in the Pacific became the first to unlock the Corsair's deadly potential. They learned that this wasn't just another fighter. It was an entirely new kind of weapon that required entirely new tactics. And by early 944, these battle-hardened Marine pilots were bringing their revolutionary aircraft and tactics to the Mediterranean. The hunters arrive. Meanwhile, back in Italy, pilots like Captain Torriani were still dominating the skies with their elegant Machi C-202 Folgore fighters. The Folgore was truly beautiful, fast, maneuverable, and flown by skilled pilots who had honed their craft during the Spanish Civil War. In traditional dogfighting, these Italian aces were masters. But by 944, everything was falling apart for Italian aviation. The country had surrendered, but German forces occupied northern Italy. Many of the best pilots had defected or stopped flying. Aircraft production had virtually ceased, and remaining pilots were flying patched-together fighters running on questionable fuel. Still, they maintained their confidence. After all, their reconnaissance photos of the new American fighter seemed to confirm their assumptions. "Look at this thing," Toriani told his squadron mates, pointing at the Corsair photos. "This looks like something a child would draw if you asked them to design an airplane. How are we supposed to take this seriously?" They had no idea that death was approaching at 400 plus MP. The revolutionary tactics. What the Italian pilots didn't understand was that the Corsair had spawned an entirely new form of aerial warfare. Marine pilots had learned brutal lessons in the Pacific. Traditional dogfighting was suicide against this aircraft. Instead, they developed tactics that played to the Corsair's incredible strengths. Major Pappy Boyington explained it perfectly to his pilots. The F4U isn't just another fighter. It's a completely new kind of weapon. Forget everything you know about dogfighting. This aircraft is designed to kill, not to dance. Use its speed, use its firepower, and never give the enemy a fair fight. The new tactics were simple, but deadly. Dive on enemy formations from high altitude, make high-speed firing. Passes with devastating effect climb away before the enemy could respond. Control the terms of engagement. Completely. Energy management over maneuverability. Firepower over finesse. And in January 944, these tactics were about to be exported to the Mediterranean. The moment of truth, February 4th, 44, 5,000 feet above the Italian countryside. Captain Toriani spots them first. B-25 Mitchell bombers with their fighter escort approaching from the southeast. "Contact. 2 o'clock high," he radios. "I count 12 escort fighters." Wait. As the range closes, those distinctive inverted gull wings become unmistakable. Those must be the new Corsairs. They're even uglier in person. Lieutenant Santini laughs over the radio. "Look at those ridiculous wings." What happened next changed everything. Major Robert "Cowboy" Cowan, leading the Corsair formation, had spotted the Italian fighters immediately. Unlike the confident Italians, Cowan felt no amusement. He'd seen too many good pilots die from underestimating opponents, but he knew exactly what his F4Us were capable of. "Bandits, 11 o'clock high," Cowan announced calmly. "4 contacts, looks like Maquis. Remember your briefing, gentlemen. We have the speed and the firepower. Use them." Then Cowan did something that violated every traditional rule of fighter combat. Instead of turning to engage the attacking Italian fighters, he ignored them completely and continued straight toward the bombers. The Italian pilots were baffled. In their experience, escort fighters always turned to engage attackers. This suggested either cowardice or incompetence. Toriani felt his confidence surge as he rolled into his attack dive. The lead Corsair was perfectly positioned in his gun sight, flying straight and level like a training target. At 400 yards, he pressed the trigger. What happened next was seared into his memory forever. The shock of reality. Instead of continuing straight or trying to evade, the Corsair suddenly pulled up into a climb so steep and so fast that it seemed to defy physics itself. That massive Pratt & Whitney engine, unleashing over 2,000 horsepower, hauled the fighter skyward like a rocket. In seconds, the Corsair had gained 2,000 feet and was positioning for a counterattack. "Madonna," Toriani gasped, watching the American fighter climb away from him like it was powered by magic. His beautiful Maquis simply couldn't match the raw power of that enormous engine. Then Major Cowan dove back down for his counterattack. The 650 caliber machine. Guns opened fire at 300 yards, their muzzle flashes creating a deadly constellation of light. 4,500 rounds per minute of devastating firepower screamed toward the Italian fighter. The impact was catastrophic. Toriani felt his Maquis shudder as massive bullets, each weighing nearly 2 ounces, began tearing his aircraft apart. These weren't the small-caliber rounds he was used to facing. These were aircraft-destroying hammers. The first burst lasted only 2 seconds, but it was enough to doom the Italian fighter. Bullets smashed through the engine cowling, severing oil lines and punching holes in cylinder heads. The windscreen exploded in a shower of glass. Control cables were cut, but it was the psychological impact that was most devastating. The sound of those 50 caliber bullets striking his aircraft was like being inside a giant drum during a thunderstorm. The vibration was so intense his vision blurred and his hands were shaken from the controls. "My God," he gasped into his radio. "What kind of guns are those?" "The massacre continues," Lieutenant Santini. Watching his squadron leader's aircraft disintegrate under the Americans' guns, felt his confidence evaporate like morning mist. The Corsair's attack had been so fast, so devastating, that there had been no time to react. One moment, Torriani had been diving on what appeared to be an easy target. The next, his aircraft was trailing smoke and debris as it spiraled toward Earth. But the nightmare wasn't over. As Santini attempted to avenge his squadron leader, another Corsair dove on him from above, its 6 machine guns already chattering death. The 50 caliber bullets struck his Machi with the force of sledgehammers. First burst through the engine, destroying the supercharger. Second burst up the fuselage, shattering the canopy and wounding Santini. Third burst struck the wing root and severed the main spar. Santini's fighter broke apart in midair. The wing folded upward as structural failure propagated through the airframe. The young Italian pilot barely managed to bail out before his aircraft exploded in a ball of orange flame. In less than 2 minutes, the Italian formation was shattered. 2 aircraft down, 1 pilot. Dead one drifting toward Earth under a parachute, 2 remaining pilots making the only rational decision available. They ran, but even retreat wasn't safe from the Corsair's devastating capabilities. The psychological warfare, the speed and decisiveness of these attacks, reverberated through Italian fighter squadrons for months. Pilots who had been confident in their abilities suddenly found themselves facing an enemy with seemingly supernatural capabilities. The Corsair's combination of speed, firepower, and ruggedness made it nearly invincible. Most demoralizing was the realization that this wasn't just about superior equipment, it was about a completely different approach to warfare. The American pilots weren't trying to outfly their opponents in traditional dogfights. They were using their aircraft's advantages to avoid fair fights entirely, creating situations where the outcome was predetermined by superior performance. Word spread quickly. Il Diavolo Blu, the Blue Devil Italian pilots began reporting Corsair sightings even when no F4Us were in the area. The distinctive sound of the aircraft's engine, a deep, throaty roar unlike any other fighter, became a source of terror. Flight Sergeant Mario Bellagamba wrote in his diary, "Today we scrambled to intercept bombers over Florence. Someone reported Corsairs in the area. Immediately the formation began to spread out, pilots looking nervously over their shoulders. We never saw a single Corsair, but the mission was ruined. How can we fight an enemy that defeats us just by existing?" The technical revolution, what made the Corsair so devastatingly effective, wasn't just one thing, it was everything. The engine, that Pratt & Whitney R2800, wasn't just powerful, it was a masterpiece of engineering. Cylinders in 2 rows, producing power that seemed impossible to pilots accustomed to less capable engines. The armament, those 650 caliber Browning machine guns, represented a quantum leap in fighter firepower. While European designers focused on lighter, faster-firing guns, Americans maximized the destructive power of each round. The structure, massively overbuilt for carrier operations, this translated to exceptional battle damage tolerance. Italian pilots watched in dismay as their successful attacks barely affected Corsairs that continued flying normally. Marine Captain James Zeke Silvioli returned from a mission over Rome with his Corsair riddled with 20mm cannon holes. Any other fighter would have gone down. The F4U just kept flying like nothing happened. It's not just a fighter, it's a flying tank. The collapse by summer 944. The psychological dominance of the F4U was breaking Italian will to fight. Captain Torriani, recovering from his crash and reflecting on his encounter, wrote in his diary, "We have been fighting the last war while the Americans have been preparing for the next one. Our beautiful Machis were designed for aerial warfare of 940, but the Corsair represents 150. We are not just outmatched, we are obsolete. The statistics were brutal. Kill ratio. 6 Italian fighters lost for every Corsair claimed morale. Pilots requesting transfers to avoid Corsair encounters. Effectiveness. Italian air resistance virtually ceased by September 44. The Regia Aeronautica, which had begun the war as a proud and capable force, had been systematically destroyed by an enemy representing a new generation of aerial warfare. The legacy the F4U Corsair proved that in warfare, appearances can be fatally deceiving. The aircraft that Italian pilots had dismissed as an ugly flying bathtub had revolutionized air combat, introducing concepts that would influence fighter design for decades. The tactical principles developed by marine pilots, energy management, superior firepower, technological advantage, became the foundation of jet-age fighter tactics. For Captain Torriani and the Italian pilots who survived their encounters with the Blue Devil, the lesson was learned too late, and at too high a cost. The laughter that had echoed through Italian ready rooms in early 1944 was replaced by silence, the silence of pilots who had learned to fear the distinctive whistle of the Corsair's approach, as the eternal silence of those who learned too late that some jokes can kill. The F4U Corsair had announced the arrival of a new era in aerial warfare, one where technological superiority and tactical innovation would triumph over tradition and experience. In the end, the Italian pilots' initial reaction was understandable but fatal. They had judged the aircraft by its appearance rather than its capabilities, a mistake that cost them their air force, and for many, their lives. The Blue Devil had taught the world a lesson that resonates through the jet age and beyond. In the deadly serious business of aerial combat, it's not how you look that matters, it's how effectively you can destroy your enemies when the shooting starts.